Welcome to the And She Looked Up Creative Hour podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Hartfield, and I'm an artist and an entrepreneur. And yes, those two things can go together. This podcast is for the artists, the creatives, and the makers who want to find a way to make a living doing what they love. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the And She Looked Up podcast. As always, I'm your host, Melissa, and this week I have a really fun episode for you. My guest is copywriter Natalie Gates, and we are going to be talking about the importance of copywriting in your business. Hello, Natalie. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
I am excited to have you here, but before we dive in, I do have a few housekeeping things to mention. So just a heads up that episode 70, which will be airing in a week or two, will be the last episode of season 2, and that's when we head into our regular summer season break hiatus, and I will be back the week after Labor Day with a whole brand new season 3, which I'm very excited about. And in the meantime, I will be re-airing old episodes of the podcast every Friday, so there will still be new podcast episodes. Some of you may have heard them, some of them, they may be new to you, so you just don't know. And the other thing I just wanted to mention is we just launched our brand new Facebook page for the podcast, which is something I wasn't going to do, but Facebook made some really exciting announcements last week when I recorded this, that they were going to be allowing people to listen to podcast feeds within Facebook, but the podcast has to have a Facebook page. So I have started a Facebook page for And She Looked Up, and if you spend time on Facebook or you think you might like to listen to the podcast on Facebook, please head over there and give us a like. Just search for And She Looked Up and we will pop up right at the top of the list. So that's that for housekeeping. Now let's get into this week's interview. And before we get too far, I'm just going to give you a little bit more of an introduction to Natalie. She is a Vancouver Island-based website copywriter for creatives and service-based entrepreneurs. So she helps fellow small business owners like you and me embrace our quirks through captivating brand voice strategy and converting website copy. And if you are somebody who struggles with words or with getting the right words up on your website or in your marketing materials, Natalie's here. She's going to give us some tips on how you can do a little bit of this yourself, and also on when you might really want to work with a copywriter like her and why that can be so beneficial. So that's what we're talking about today. So Natalie, the first question I ask everybody who comes on the podcast is, did you feel like you were creative as a kid?
Yeah, I can definitely say I was one of those, or I am one of those writers who started writing at a young age. Like I have very fond memories in computer or writing class in elementary school, like writing stories about my dogs and stuff. Like that's something that is really like strong in my memory still, and it kind of continued on throughout childhood. Like I love to paint and draw. Theater, I was always like on the shyer side, so I like to be in the background roles of like things like theater or like dance and stuff. But it was definitely, creativity was a common theme growing up, for sure.
Did you keep on writing all the way through high school? Like what was it that made you think that you might want to be a writer for a living?
Yeah. So the writing thing definitely lived on once I got into high school, and English class, like starting there, became my favorite subject. And then when I'd get encouragement from teachers, it just kind of lit this flame under me to keep at it, like writing stories and stuff. And eventually doing like writing 12 class in like grade 12. And it always was like the thing I loved most at school. I hated math, unfortunately.
So did I.
And all of that. But so it really got me thinking, like, is there a way that I can like do writing as a career? And it was always kind of seemed far-fetched that it could be sustainable, because while I was creative, I've always also been pretty practical. So yeah, I was just trying to like find a way that I could embrace that, but make a career out of it. So I originally thought I was going to go into journalism, and that's what brought me into university. and that's what I studied there and stuff, along with political science. And I was playing around with that whole world until eventually I found the marketing world soon after that, which still let me embrace like my love of writing, but in a bit more strategic, like practical way again, like
Yeah.
bringing that practicality into it. Yeah.
It's funny because I think if you are somebody who loves to write when you're in school, it really isn't marketed as a career option to you.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, there are so many careers that writing is a huge component of what you do. I'm always shocked by how much writing I've had to do in my career. And I think it's unfortunate that they don't really showcase those options to you when you're younger and show you that, yes, there are some really cool things you can do if you love to write. So, yeah.
And even if it isn't like the central part of your job, there's so many soft and hard skills that go from
Yes.
like taking a complicated information and distilling it into something that's
Yes.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's so true.
So when you got into the marketing world, what were you doing there, and how did that lead you? How did you go from working marketing to starting your own business?
Yeah, so I soon after school, when I was still in the journalism mindset, that's when I transitioned into public relations and PR. So I was doing that for a while, and learning a lot about the whole digital marketing landscape. But I was also doing some of my own like content writing on the side, mostly for fun, to just add to like the amount of writing I was doing in my day-to-day work. I was at an agency, and then I eventually ended up working for a destination marketing organization. And that's when the pandemic hit about a year
Ooh,
later.
yeah.
So I took my desire, because I'd always had this idea that I would love to freelance full time and run my own business. It was just finding the confidence, the kick in the pants to get started. So that's when that happened. It kind of forced me to jump off the diving board and give it a go and take everything I'd learned and done up to then to help other people.
Yeah, I think you were not alone
Yeah.
in that situation.
I know.
I don't know. Sometimes it takes a big event to get us onto the path that we're meant to
Yeah.
go on. Do you still write fiction at all in your spare time or for fun?
Not really. I really want to. I do like more journaling, and I've been trying to explore my creativity in other ways, like more visually, painting and
Mm.
all that. But I would love to do more fiction again. And sometimes when you're staring at a screen writing words all day, it's hard to take it out and do it on the side for fun too. But
Yeah.
I do miss doing some of that.
Yeah. You'll have to do like NaNoWriMo or something like that and
Yeah.
sit down and write a novel.
Right. I would love to.
So let's talk about copywriting, because I think a lot of people have heard the word, but they don't necessarily know what it is. Like they kind of have an idea, but they're not really sure. So maybe you could tell us what it is that a copywriter does and why it's so important, because it is. I'm just going to give you all a heads up before Natalie dives into this. It is really important. And it's something that tends to get overlooked on our websites and our marketing materials. But when you have a good copywriter, it can make a world of difference to getting your message across. So tell us all about copywriting.
Yeah, so there is a lot of different types of copy, and different copywriters do different things, but I like to start by talking about copywriting versus content writing. And those two things overlap a lot, and some content is copy, some copy is content, but just for to get kind of like a clear picture, in general, content writing is written content that is meant to engage and educate, connect with your audience without directly making a sale. It's usually at the top of your funnel. It's how people find you and they learn to like you and all that stuff. And then copywriting, on the other hand, is more of that sales focused writing. So it's actually working to inspire your readers to take an action or convert them, whether that's getting them to buy or sign up or just contact you, click a button. That's where the copy comes in. And of course, you can have content that is meant to to aid in a sale. Like you could have a blog post with a call to action. So it all works together, but it's just good, useful to have those two definitions. So yeah.
So would a general idea, and this is very general, be that something like blog content would be more content writing, but a launch page or a landing page might be more copywriting?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Blog content, social media captions, certain emails are content. Then, yeah, landing pages, sales pages, your website is copy
Okay.
because that's all directed at making an action very
Okay.
directly. Yeah. So certain copywriters, yeah, they do website copy, you could do email campaigns, sales pages, full launch packages, or they can be part of your blog writing strategy, depending on the business's goals and the copywriter specialties.
Right. So while you might write the majority of your blog content, every now and then you might bring a copywriter in to help you with a specific strategy that you're trying to get out there in your blog content. Would that be where you
Yeah,
could?
you definitely could. Some people are more content writers and they specialize in just helping you generate that content consistently.
Right.
But if you are, yeah, running like a certain campaign or you want to focus on a certain part of your marketing, you might bring in a copywriter to help you develop all the elements, which include a blog post as well as perhaps landing pages or emails to help funnel people through to your goal.
Right. So a lot of us creatives, we're not good at selling. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not what we like to do. We would prefer to be creating. And so when we do have to sell something, that can be very challenging for us because it, for so many reasons, so many mindset issues, it feels icky. We don't like to ask for money, all those things. So would that be like a good example of when you might want to bring a copywriter in to come help you?
Yeah, for sure. Because I totally know what it's like to feel icky, yeah, selling yourself when you're talking about yourself. And a lot of that I feel like is a mindset thing you need to shift. But a copywriter could definitely help you come up with ways to not just like blatantly sell, but like help you identify with the pain points or like the struggles of things your customers are looking for, and then help you articulate solutions, like articulate how you provide a solution. So you're not just selling, you're solving a problem, and they could definitely help you like strategize that and get the messaging so it doesn't sound icky or anything, but it's helpful.
do you do you ever struggle writing your own copy?
Oh yeah, oh my gosh. The amount of times I've like rewritten my about page, I'm still like always
It's so funny how we
working
get
on it.
so
Yeah.
caught up in our own heads when it's us, but we can see
Yeah.
what other people need to do so clearly.
Yeah. That outsider perspective is just insanely valuable.
It really is. So when you're just starting out with your business, especially if you're bootstrapping, you might not have much of a budget for a copywriter. So in that scenario, if you have a very small budget, you have a little bit of money that you can spend, but you can't afford to have somebody come in and do it all. What's the one thing you would recommend hiring a copywriter to help you with that you could potentially even reuse or leverage throughout other parts of your business before you can go all in?
Yeah. So it can definitely depend on your specific situation, but I really believe that the website is a really good place to start because it's such a central element of your business and it's like your home base. So the process of working on that copy with a copywriter is something you could totally like repurpose and take with you through the rest of your marketing materials. That said, website copy isn't the most inexpensive copy around because it's quite a big project, but maybe if you worked with someone on like an audit of your website copy, that could be a really good place to start. So you get that outsider perspective and you see where your messaging is and isn't working, and they can help you develop some go-to phrases or tips to like strengthen your brand voice throughout that process for you to take into the wilds.
Okay, so that's interesting. So having somebody do an audit. So if you had somebody come in and do an audit on your existing website, what are the kinds of things they'd be looking at and talking to you about?
Yeah, they would definitely, if you're especially if you're auditing the full website, they would look at the customer journey, like how are you guiding people to where they need to be through your copy? Have you put thought into that throughout your pages, or is it kind of random and not really providing a journey? Like, are your buttons, are they in the right spots? Do they have compelling copy that makes people want to click them? Or they could look at your headline, like your subheads and your headlines, because as you may have heard, a lot of people reading websites will just read the big text, the
Yep.
subheads across it. So just making sure those are strong and that they are doing their job and letting people know what they're about to read and highlighting all the important stuff. And and then even like the most simple things like making sure that the formatting is good, like you don't have giant blocks of text, which is really off-putting on a website.
Yeah.
So there are lots of different things that they could look at, and depending on where you're at, you could get more into the nitty-gritty. But yeah,
I
that's
think
definitely a
that's
place to start.
I think that's even important to know, to realize if you are a writer, if you're somebody who does write, is that how people consume writing on a website is very different than how they consume it when they're reading a book or a paper or something like that. And formatting plays a huge role in that. I did
Yes.
visual web design when I was doing my
Oh, yeah.
design degree. So UX design is like, so I get really agitated when
Yeah.
it's when it's not good. But yeah, absolutely. Things like breaking up your paragraphs and using proper headings and things like that can make a huge difference to
Yeah.
reading on a website. Okay, so what if you are fresh starting out, you have no money, like there's nothing in the kitty to pay to have somebody come in and help you. What are, like, where do you start with copy when it comes to that?
For your website specifically?
Yeah, your website or even just your market. Like, what should you focus on first? And how do you, I guess, what are some steps you can sort of think about in terms of pulling all your content together? And
Yeah.
like you said, you want that flow, right? That goes through the site.
Yeah. Yeah. So assuming you have all your offers like down and clear, you want to really think about, and you know who you're speaking to. Um, the next step, if you haven't already, is just making sure you're super clear on the actual benefits your offers provide people. Like you're not just looking at all the features, all the cool things they get, or the cool materials your product is made out of, but going a step deeper beyond that. And how does that actually benefit my ideal person? How does it improve their life or their job? And getting those ideas really crystal clear before you start writing anything, or else it just won't have the structure and the power that it should. So then once you're actually writing your website and you have those things all clear, I always say think about the journey again that you want people to take when they're on your website, and kind of stepping back and thinking about where you want them to end up and exactly what they need to know on each page before anything happens is essential to laying it all out. Like I spend a lot of time with just writing like bullet point lists, like really ugly skeleton frames for what will go on each page before I start actually really writing anything, because that structure, for especially for something like a website, is really important, the planning process. So you don't even need to get all creative and writing beautiful words right away. Like take away that pressure and think about the journey first.
Yeah, that's actually a really good tip. If you can put everything in, just list bullet points of your key points. I think probably when you're writing anything, but it does, because I think that's something that's really hard for a lot of us. And this was going to be my next question: is before you get started with copy for your website or your marketing or anything really, whether you're writing it or whether somebody else is, like, how important is it for you to have that clear vision of what your business is, and further down the line what your products or your services are? Because I know as a designer, that's one of the most challenging things to get my clients to think about. Is they come and they say, I want a logo, I want it to be pretty, or their branding, I want pretty colors, I want a scripty font, but they can't tell me what their business actually is.
Yeah.
And that's a key part. You know, branding and copyright, like it all works together. Branding, copywriting, content writing, they all come together to put your business out into the world and show people through visuals and through words what it is that you're about. And I think that's a big challenge for a lot of small business owners when they're starting out, is just figuring out who they are.
Yeah. Like life.
It is. And the truth is, very often your first year of business has so much change happening in it that by the time you get to year 2, who you were when you started out is not who you are now.
It's so true. Yeah, definitely. I know I've been in that boat.
Yeah, I think we all have if we've been around for a few years. It's like it's really challenging. So if you're, you know, one of the things you've mentioned is the flow, the customer journey that you want people to go on. And when you're just starting out and you're not even sure that you're sure what you want the journey to be, do you have any tips for how people can kind of start to crystallize that in their mind?
Like the journey to take on.
The journey to take the, you know, sitting down and figuring out, like almost like a flow chart. You know, like this is where I want people to go. I want them to start here. I want them to end up here. Do you have any tips for how they can develop something like that on their own?
Yeah. So you probably know where the last, or like the point of conversion happens. So if you're product-based business, it's going to be in the checkout page, right? Or the at least the product description page. They click add to cart, order. If you're a service-based business, it's probably a contact form reaching out to either book something or schedule a call. So have that clear in your mind as the end goal. And when you're just starting out, you can keep it super simple. You could just have a couple pages. Let's say you have a home page, and the first thing you want to do is recognize your customer's problem, or like what they're looking for, like let them know they're in the right spot early on in the website journey. And then, so yeah, like recognizing that problem, depending on what it is, you might, what we like to say, agitate it a bit, just so like they know to keep reading, they know they're in the right spot. And then that's when you present your solution. So this is the journey they're taking: problem, agitate, solution. And then that's when you present your product. So that could be a link to go to a service page, or an overview of what your offer is, and then a button directing them to take the next action, which could be learning more, or reaching out, or downloading a freebie or a resource. So I would just say, think about the problem or desire your ideal customer has, and position your journey as the solution. If that makes sense. And then providing the next best action for them to get that solution.
It does make sense. That makes a lot of sense. And I think if you can look at it as like a flow chart, like I want them to start here. If they have this problem, I want them to go this way. If they have this problem, I want them to go that way, kind of. But the idea is you're funneling them down to that click or that email or whatever it is that you need them to do. So, the journey is a good word for it.
Yeah.
So if you are just starting out, you've got your brand new shiny website, you're super proud of it, somebody designed it for you, it looks beautiful, but you're not sure what to fill it with. What are the key things that you absolutely need to have on your website from a copy perspective?
Yes. Yeah. So on your website, there are a few really core things that might sound obvious, but sometimes they're forgotten, or we just don't know. So who you are, or what you do / provide, and who you provide it for. So make it really clear who you provide that thing for, and you're not being too vague or general if possible. And then how you do that, or how you provide that thing, and a statement that makes it clear what makes you different. So this could be something about your process, or your values, and and then who are you, like your name and the human behind your business, especially as a small business owner, a creative. I think having that personal touch point on your website is really important to make that connection.
Yeah, I think that's something that gets lost very often when we're small businesses. I think some of us want to make ourselves look like a big business.
Mhm.
And I think some of us are just really shy about putting that information out there. But it can, when you're a small business, people really resonate with who you are. That's
Yeah.
really important. So, what if you don't have a website and instead you are selling through your social media or through a platform like Etsy or maybe eBay or something like that, where you don't have the same opportunity to, you're not driving people to a website. Like in some cases, on Instagram or Facebook, you do have the opportunity to make that connection. They're following you for a reason. But then somewhere like Etsy or eBay, you are just a listing, you know?
Yeah.
So they're not necessarily, unless they actually go and view your shop, which a lot of people on those platforms don't do, you don't have the same opportunity to make those connections that you do on your website.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was going to talk about a bit about like taking Etsy product descriptions as an example. So
Sure.
for anything like that, like social media captions that you're selling on or Etsy descriptions, there's a couple really key copywriting ideas that you should keep in mind that are often forgotten or just not acknowledged. And it's basically just know your customer avatar really well and make the copy very focused on them, not you. So it's less about I create this product using my fantastic materials and more like this is the benefit you get. So that was not a good example, but just putting the focus of your copy, whether it's a description or a caption, on the person, the reader, because as much as your audience does, they want to connect with you when they're reading any sort of sales copy or product description. They care more about themselves. They want to be able to envision themselves with the product that you're selling and how it will change their life, make them into the type of person that they want to be seen as, which can be subtle. Like if it's a piece of art, they want to feel like the type of person that knows how to collect local beautiful art. Like, well, how does it affect them as a being instead of just talking about your business? So it's basically just that me versus them perspective, and always putting perspective on the reader or the potential customer. And then similar to that is basically features versus benefits, which I kind of touched on already, but it's really easy to list out the materials or the features of something, and those details should be included, but we should focus on the benefits of those features first. So,
Okay,
yeah.
so maybe if you're selling jewelry, instead of starting the listing with these are handcrafted
Mhm.
silver, using silver findings, fastenings, whatever, and instead it's like these earrings, these drop earrings would be perfect for, a night out on the town with your best friends kind of thing. You're looking to have a girls' night kind of. So it makes them feel like, oh, these are super fun, and this is exactly what I need for that thing that I'm going to, kind of thing, instead of making it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, helping them envision the type of outfit it'll go with, or like what this says about
Yeah.
you, like you're a nature lover, or yeah, exactly.
Okay. So, yes, depending on what you sell, you'll have to give that some thought on the type of person that, would be buying this and why they would be buying it. And I guess that would be a good way to maybe think about it, is think about how your customer will feel when they get your product or they've
Yes.
had your service, type of thing. Okay, so I know places like Etsy and things, it's really tricky because you are really more focused on the product than you are on your story. So if you are going down the route of writing your own copy, particularly for your website, we just talked about it, how a lot of us, we don't want to sound salesy, but at the same time, we need to make money. Let's be honest, we all need to pay our bills, and we're selling our stuff because we need to make money. We love to do what we do, but at the end of the day, we need dollars. So we don't want to sound salesy, but we need to make money. So how do you do that without it being icky?
The ultimate struggle. Yeah, I know. And it's hard. I know in like my copywriting communities, there's a lot of shifting of the mindset around what they call bro marketing and like using pain points to brainwash people into buying stuff, which is obviously really gross and that's not what we want. But like you said, we do need to make money to sustain our business. So there's a whole different way we can think about selling. And I just listened to your really great episode about selling. I think that was last week, and it just was very applicable to copywriting too. So instead of nitpicking pain points or using them in a negative way, you want to look at it again as providing a solution. So some helpful phrases that can get those juices flowing might be like, imagine if blank, 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 or you deserve this, or what if instead of this, you had that. So just really showing that you recognize what your ideal customer or client needs, but angling it in a way that they don't have to struggle with it anymore, and you have a solution to help them feel even better about themselves. And you're not like ramming those pain points in until they feel so crappy that they want to buy, because that's not what we need. And yeah, so definitely just thinking about selling as providing a solution and helping other humans.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Helping other humans.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, I think if you spend any time in the online world, the type of marketing that you're talking about is that very I've never heard it called bro marketing, but that really does sum it up.
Yeah.
And that's not what we're aiming for. It's not the you're really trying to figure out how to make a connection, I think, and make these people feel like they want to be around you.
Yeah, they want to be surrounded by your work. And I know it probably sounds a bit different if you're a product-based business, but you're still providing a solution, and like you're using your products to make someone feel loved or to feel good about themselves. You're not saying buy this product just because it benefits me, but you're just looking at how it improves their lives and makes them feel good about themselves. So I know.
Absolutely. I think even if you are a product based, I think for most of us who create, the people who buy from us do want that connection with us. Like, you know, that painting you have on your wall that you bought, or that handmade vase that you purchased. Like, I think a lot of us really love to be able to tell our friends the story behind it when we bought it. So I don't think we should discount our story and telling people, you know, giving people a way to connect on an emotional level with us besides just yes, totally. my painting will look great over your sofa.
Yeah.
It will fill that big wall space that you don't know what to do with. So
I know.
Yeah.
I have this ring. My fiance gave me this ring from this local jewelry maker, and it's imprinted with driftwood from one of the beaches in Victoria.
Oh, cool.
And that's part of the story of the product, and that's why I love it so much. Like, whenever someone asks me about it, like, I'm just so like proud to tell them about the story behind this ring. So
definitely.
I know it works.
Absolutely. So I think that's one way that we as creatives can really sell without selling, is to give people that opportunity to connect with us on some kind of human level.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
It's all it comes back to.
It really does. I think so much of selling really is. Heather Travis, my regular monthly guest host, that's the thing we talk about. It's all about research and relationships. Pretty much running a small business. That's what it is at the end of the day. So so as you're pulling together your copy and all the points that you want to put on and creating your story. I think one of the things, and this is something I actually talked to with Diane Jacob about a few episodes ago, is nailing down your brand voice. And we were talking about it from the perspective of not so much copywriting, but more content writing, and how a lot of us are very afraid to have a voice, or a unique voice, I guess, because we don't want to put anyone off.
Right.
And yet sometimes I think you do, as an artist or a creative, there are times where you do want to put certain people off. I think it's important to recognize you're not for everyone. And so it's okay to embrace your voice. But the hard part is, how do you figure out what your voice is? Yeah. How do you nail that down, especially when you're doing it from a perspective where you are selling?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so the first thing you want to figure out is, especially as a small business or solopreneur, is figure out how similar you want your brand voice to be to your real, everyday, real life voice. And as a creative solopreneur, it's probably going to be pretty similar, but you can always draw that line where you feel comfortable. So you don't have to talk about every single thing about your personality, or if you swear a lot in real life, but you don't want to in your brand, you don't have to. But if you want to, so just kind of figuring out where you draw that line between brand and human being is the first step. And then the next step is, again, because selling is a relationship, it's building relationships, is thinking about the feelings, emotions, and words that resonate with your people, and finding the middle part of that Venn diagram. So just like, for example, what kind of jargon do you not use, because you don't want to be using phrases that your ideal customers or clients don't understand. So even if there's something that you use every day in your business, figuring out what does and doesn't go in consumer facing copy in that kind of regard is a really important step first or second. And then comes what I think is the fun part, is just analyzing your voice. So once you've kind of got like guidelines of what type of feelings your brand voice should, or like adjectives your brand voice should include, and how similar it is to your real life, and you kind of got some of the strategy down, then you can start, first look at stuff you've written and just take note of like consistent points that come up. Read your writing out loud a lot, and this will also just help you improve your writing in general, because a lot of people, I think, skip that step and they don't read it once they write something. So just like immerse yourself back into your writing. You can record yourself to help get that outsider perspective of what your voice is to keep it consistent. And then, of course, to get a real outsider perspective, you can ask friends or past clients in like quick interviews how they would describe your voice, and just keep building it from there. And if it aligns with your business strategy, then keep it going and take note of what people resonate with. And yeah, it's really a lot of self-reflection again.
It is. A lot of being a business owner is self-reflection, actually, when you think about it. But those are some good points there. And I think it's always so challenging, and your voice can change. Like, I think that's important to understand too, is that as you evolve, your business evolves, and your voice and your brand evolve, and that's totally okay. For that to happen. So it's not like you're tied to this for the rest of your life.
No, of course not. Yeah, because I know, visually your branding is probably going to change a lot. So your voice will probably too. Like, I've seen small businesses go from very, very casual and like quirky, especially on social media, but then they want to take it to the next step later on, maybe on their website. So they want to be more elegant, formal. So you're totally allowed to do that. It's just just trying to be as consistent as possible when you are channeling a certain voice, so people don't feel off put if they read something in one place and then something that's totally different in another. Not that you can't be different, have different emotions and feelings, especially depending on the platform, but just making sure it's not like shocking and doesn't feel out of place. is a good step to take.
Yeah, you brought up two really good points there. The first one is the boundary setting, and how you can set boundaries and still have a strong voice. And that's actually one of the really interesting things about this podcast. Everybody who comes on the podcast, I ask them prior to our interview if there's anything that is off limits in the conversation. And the most common thing that I get by, I would say, the majority of people who come on the podcast is that their family is off limits, other than mentioning that, yes, they have a family, but their spouse and their children are not up for discussion. And it's interesting because that is a huge part of a person's life. But at the same time, everybody who's come on the podcast has still had a really strong voice without us necessarily having to talk about that beyond the fact that, yes, they're a mom, or yes, they're in a relationship or something like that. So you can draw those boundaries and still showcase who you are to the world. Like, you can find that balancing point.
Yeah, because if we had to share everything, it would just be
be
even more exhausting. It would not. No, it would not be good. Yeah, so you're totally allowed to do that, and that's what makes it kind of fun too. It's like you kind of get to put on a alter ego, sort of, and decide what it looks like. Like, yeah, but you want to be authentic.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing that you kind of alluded to there, but we didn't really get into it, is that a lot of us who create, if our friends were to describe us, they would probably, and that's a great tip, by the way, getting your friends to help you out with this, but, you know, our friends might describe us as being quirky, and which is great. I embrace quirky, but sometimes that can be really hard to come across on your own website. So do you have any tips on how to kind of be able to let that part of you that makes you really fun or quirky or interesting shine without it being maybe too over the top? So that's a hard balancing act. And sometimes, you know, there's certain character traits, like if you're if you have like a kind of a sarcastic wit, that can be really hard to come across in the online world without seriously offending a lot of people.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so if you do want to really let your quirky self shine through, and I know I've had clients that do, and I've clients that don't. Myself, I do try to embrace it, and I always see it as you want to balance the personality and like really fun copy without making things unclear, which can happen if people are trying to shove too much personality into something. I always start writing without filter. Like, I'll just type with like whatever crazy stuff comes to mind that fits the person's voice I'm trying to envision, and then I think that's in the editing process is when we calm things down if we need to. And decide where the line is drawn, like, oh, that will put people off or put the wrong people off, or that's cool, like it makes me likable. So I always say, especially when you're trying to get creative and like write that personality driven stuff, is go full on in the early stages and then refine, because if you're trying to like edit too much as you go, I find it makes it harder to really get anything done or get that golden copy in the end.
That's a good tip too. So it's almost like your first draft, like just get it all out.
Yeah, like this is how I really feel, and then you can figure out what you don't want.
Yes. So I think a lot of us just think that you know, we don't believe in first drafts. Maybe. Yeah. It's just like we just feel like we have to get it perfect right out of the gate, and we don't. You don't have to do that. So that's a good tip.
Never have.
I do have a question, because we've been focusing a little bit on product-based people, but if we could just talk about service-based people for a bit, because that's a little bit of a different beast. And I think this is something Heather and I were talking about in the selling episode. One of the things that is so important when you're a service-based business is, especially if you're a service-based business, that is a considerable investment for your client, and maybe not a regular investment. So, you know, a wedding photographer, a graphic designer who's doing your branding, those types of things where you're spending the customer, your client, is spending an awful lot of money to work with you. They're getting into a situation where they don't know the questions to ask. They don't know what, like, should I show up for my photo shoot wearing a certain color, or should I, all the different pieces. How important is that if you're a service-based to kind of guide people through your process before they even contact you or even post contact you? I'm not being very clear on this, but like, is that something that you would want to put up on your website? Is it something you do after they contact you? Like, have like a separate piece of communication that explains to them, this is what's going to happen. You're going to show up for your shoot. This is the process we're going to go through. This is, somebody will be there to do your hair, or no, you have to show up with your hair done prior. Like, all those pieces. Is that something where a copywriter could be really helpful?
Yeah. And I would definitely say it can depend if you want to have like all the details on your website or if it's part of a follow-up thing. In general, I would say don't overwhelm your website with like every little nitty-gritty of your process, but I definitely usually recommend showing that you do have a thoughtful process on your website and illustrating in a way that shows how that benefits the client as well. And you can also use it to help differentiate yourself. Like, what's so great about your process that makes you different, unique, and worth investing in? And how will it put me as the client at ease? Mm-hmm. So yeah, having a copywriter or someone to help you, again, pull out those benefits and put the focus back on the reader so they can envision themselves in the process, which is really important. The more they can like imagine themselves in the future actually in it, that's really good stuff.
Yeah, so, that's a really good way to word it. Imagine themselves in it. Because I think when we do it over and over every day, like, it just seems obvious to us that yes, you show up wearing green to, this photo shoot, or yes, you need to do such and such, and it's just second nature to us. So we don't realize sometimes you just need to walk yourself a step back and remind yourself that your client doesn't know how it works and they're nervous.
Yeah, it's all about removing those risks.
Yeah.
Least number of risks, the better. So maybe you don't have like every single point, but you could say, once you book, you'll receive an email with essential information or something like that.
Yes, you'll receive our little PDF guide that was going to outline everything you can expect on the day of your shoot, or how to prep for it, or all those types of things. That's a really great idea.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say that you are a creative who thinks you're pretty good with words. I mean, I like to write. I think I'm pretty good with them. But when it comes to copywriting, I am not a good writer. I really, really struggle with it. And so maybe you could let us know some of the mistakes a lot of creative businesses do make with their copy, and maybe some ways that they can kind of circumvent making those mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so one big common mistake I'd say I've seen in quite a few small businesses and creatives is more of a lack of copy. So treating their website more as a portfolio without using words to do all these things we've been talking about, like helping people envision themselves in the process, showcasing the benefits and the transformations they're going to get from working with us or buying from us. So you're relying maybe a bit too much on your visual work or your audio work, which is of course going to still play a part in attracting your ideal people, but it's usually not enough without some copy to back it up. So that's definitely something you want to think about. Don't rely on your portfolio only if you can and use the power of copy. And then, when it comes to the copy itself, a few big things. I did mention like just huge blocks of text. People don't read websites like they read blog posts or novels or articles. So being really mindful of that, using crossheads, basically like little headlines before basically every paragraph is essential, because a lot of people will just skim the headlines and when it comes to the actual content of those headlines, I like to think of it as you're giving the reader a heads up of what they're about to read. So pulling that essential information. And so then if that headline does interest them, then they know to read the rest of the copy. But if you just have a big block of text without anything like showing them what it's about, it loses its effectiveness. So that's definitely a big thing.
Yeah, especially because so many people are on their phones these days.
Yeah.
And that big block of text is even worse on a phone than it is on a laptop screen.
Yeah. Taking mobile into account is super important, which can go into design, of course, but
But
it does play a role. Yeah. Another big thing I would say is clever versus clearness. A lot of creatives, they might want like their whole website to be very, very poetic and snappy, and
we want to be quirky.
yeah, and you do, and want to bring your voice, but you don't want to do it so much that you're sacrificing all the boring stuff, the journey and the clarity. That's super important on your website. So not going overboard with wordplay. Of course, you could still incorporate puns. I'm a big advocate for puns, but don't sacrifice being clear and like getting the job done. I think we already touched on this too, but focusing too much on themselves instead of the reader, that's a common thing that can easily be fixed just by even just restructuring your sentence.
Yeah, that's true. Very true. Just because this isn't a question I threw at you in our original list, but because of what we were just speaking about there, talking about things like headings and clarity, one of the things I know from the content world, from the blogging world, that type of thing, is how crucial SEO is for getting your content to surface when people Google. And is that something that you have to spend a fair amount of time worrying about with copywriting as well? Because one of the big tenets of SEO is using proper heading structure throughout your page, and asking those clear questions that people Google.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that you learn a lot about in blogging, is that, you want to actually have those words in your heading. Like if somebody Googles, how do I book a wedding photographer? That is something somebody will actually type into Google. And if you have that text on your website, then Google can kind of match the two together and say, hey, this person's asking, how do I do this? And this person has an article that has the same content, boom, type of thing. So is that something you do have to be aware of when you're doing copywriting versus content writing?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So obviously SEO is like a huge beast, but website copy does play a pretty important role. So first you want to know the search intent, so you do the right keyword research. I usually don't do a ton of the keyword research myself, but I would write the copy with that keyword in mind, and then making sure we have it in all the critical places, like your main headline, especially usually the first 100 words of a page, if it fits. I never want to sacrifice conversions or clarity or anything just for SEO, but if possible, we want to have those keywords in the headlines as much as possible in the first 100 words, and the title tags, the things that actually show up on the search result pages. And related to that, of course, would be the meta description. So the little blurb that shows up on Google is super important and actually enticing people to click, which is left out a lot. But if your page shows up on a results page, but you're not enticing people to click because of that short little blurb, then you could be losing out on some traffic there. So keeping all those things in mind are definitely important.
I mean, we could do a whole episode on SEO, but the basics for sure. Things like your heading structure, your title tags, all those things are important. And you do want that little blurb to show up. That's what's going to help you surface in the results as well. So it's good to know that you need to pay attention to that with your copywriting as well as your content writing. Okay, so if you do have the resources to hire a copywriter, and this might be for those of you who've been in business for a little bit longer and you are starting to think, I need to really spend some time on my website and really, like, I've been doing this for a year or two. I know who I am. I know what I'm offering. I know what I'm selling. I need somebody to help me get that out there. How do you find a copywriter? And how do you find one who gets your personality and what you do?
Yeah, yeah. Well, like any small business, creative business, there's lots of different ways you might come upon them. It could be social media, you sign up for email lists, or you connect in Facebook groups. Like there's all these different ways, but in general, I would say keep an eye out for people who seem to specialize or have knowledge in your niche. So whether that's small Canadian businesses or like a certain side of the creative industry, and do they write the type of copy you're looking for? So do they write websites or do they write emails? Do they do a bit of both, which is totally cool? Do they do blogs? So just making sure that their skills line up with your needs. And then, of course, you can look at other businesses they've worked with if they have a portfolio, or chat with them about that beforehand. And if you do start chatting with someone, just asking the right questions to see what their process is like and if they're enthusiastic about your vision. And then if you want to test the waters, if possible, like if it's something they offer, starting with maybe it's a smaller project like an audit or one web page or a blog post, something like that, if it is something that they have on tap, to make sure you're a good fit, which benefits you both in the long run. For example, I have a bit of a free service that is basically a quick review of a website or web page of your choice, and I give you a few thoughts on what you could improve, what you're doing well, what steps I would recommend to take it up a notch. So it's kind of a good way to test the waters and just see how my brain works. So if there's anything like that, it's always nice. And just making sure they align with your goals.
Right. And I would imagine that, like a lot of creative fields, copywriters have their own niches. I'm sure there's some that focus on, like, you work mostly with creative entrepreneurs and small businesses. And I'm sure there are people who work like with the automotive industry or different. And so maybe if you have an art print business, maybe you don't want to hire somebody who writes mainly automotive copy.
Yeah, exactly. And it's easier for everyone if you do have that line. Not saying that you have to be a specialist to be a copywriter, like some people go across industries, but like you wouldn't probably want to work with someone who specializes in emails for software companies.
Right.
So finding that right match is definitely important for both people.
Awesome. Wow. You've given us a ton of really great actionable tips here. So thank you very much for that. I hope everybody got lots of information out of that. So maybe before we wrap up, you mentioned that you have your mini web page reviews for those who want a second pair of eyes. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about that and where people can find you online.
Yeah. So my mini webpage reviews, actually I'll first say you can find me on Instagram at Words by Natalie, and there's a link in my bio there to go to those free mini webpage reviews. So basically it's just you submit a link to the webpage that you're working on or you'd like a quick second pair of eyes on, and I have a few questions for you to fill out, and then I get back to you with about a 10-minute-ish Loom video screen share with the suggestions that I have and some actionable tips to help you improve it or to just get the ball rolling. And it's free of charge, and it's really fun to see what other creative businesses are up to.
Yeah, that's great. That's an awesome little free service.
It's really fun.
No, that's great. And we will have links to all of Natalie's links, her Instagram, the mini page reviews, her website. All of that will be in the show notes, so you can definitely look her up there. Thank you, Natalie. This was great. Thanks so much for being on the show this week. Natalie's been a trooper. Our first recording episode did not go well technically, and so this is our second go at it, and I really appreciate you taking the extra time to make sure we got a good episode to put out. So thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Glad to be back. It was good.
Yes, this has been great. So everybody, you know where to find Natalie. I hope that you will take her up on her mini webpage review. I think that's such a great idea and could be super useful to so many of us. And yeah, that's it for this week, everyone. Thanks for being here, and we will be back next week with the last new episode of season 2 before we go into our summer break. So yeah, we'll see you all next week. Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the And She Looked Up Creative Hour. If you're looking for links or resources mentioned in this episode, you can find detailed show notes on our website at andshелookedup.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for our newsletter for more business tips, profiles of inspiring Canadian creative women, and so much more. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the show via your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. We always love to hear from you, so we'd love it if you'd leave us a review through iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Drop us a note via our website at andshелookedup.com or come say hi on Instagram at andshелookedup. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.